So this is the middle week of 3, where we as a church family want to do that phrase up on the screen, which is to end well together. And especially what I shared with you last week and what I share with you this week is really wisdom that was shared with us on our church's steering team by our district called our classes. And I thought enough of what they shared with us that I knew I wanted to spend the first 2 weeks of these 3 passing along those lessons to you. So to start today, I want to begin here with a passage from the Gospel of John, chapter 12. John chapter 12 is a pivot chapter. Up until John chapter 12, you have the life and teaching of Jesus. Beginning in John chapter 13, you're going to have the last night of Jesus' life start. So John 12 occurs very late in his life, probably during his last week, what's called Holy Week or the Passion Week. And this is Jesus talking to his disciples and also a group of non-Jewish people who really didn't know a whole lot about the Jewish faith, but were very intrigued by the person of Jesus. And in conversation with them, he says, quote, "The hour has come for the Son of Man," by which he means himself, "to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world keep it for eternal life." No, Jesus doesn't really mean, by the way, we're not going to put our attention on this phrase, but let me just say, he doesn't really mean you have to hate your life on earth. This is Jesus exaggerating or using hyperbole. Actually, where, though, we want to put our attention is in the middle of this quotation. Jesus says, speaking, of course, about himself and what's about to transpire in his own life, that unless a single seed or grain of wheat falls into the earth, it just remains itself. It remains one or singular. But if it is willing to die, then it is willing to bear much fruit also. Here's what Jesus is saying. If he wasn't willing to go through what was about to happen to him, culminating in his crucifixion, then his life and his mission and his intent to birth a new movement, a new kind of humanity and community that we call the church or Christianity, wouldn't have happened. It took his death in order for much fruit to be produced. So if Jesus had chosen the white American male way of going about his life, what you and I know to be Christianity never would have happened. He'd have gotten married, had a few kids, bought a nice couch, gotten cable sometime in his 40s, watched ESPN every evening, and retired to a cottage by the lake. And if that would have been the course of his life that he chose, if he would have shrunk away from this conflict that was about to climax in his cross, then what you and I know and experience as Christianity would never have been. This is what Jesus says. Comfort and ease do not lead to bearing much fruit. But he says the courage to die does. And of course, you know what? He was right. I'm sure that none of his disciples, none of the Jewish leaders that crucified him, none of the non-Jewish people with whom he is dialoguing in this quote, none of them were able to see around the corner like him. None of them could see that by him dying for us, by him dying for the cause of love and justice and equality in the world, it would birth a movement that in one generation would spread across the entire Roman Empire. Nobody saw that but Jesus. And he said with confidence, that if I, this grain of wheat, am willing to lay my life down, it will bear much fruit. Let me take you to some familiar verses. Verses that have been crucial in the life of our church from its beginning, back in the late 90s, before my time. These are the verses from which our church's name comes. And it's actually a very common metaphor in the Old Testament. Psalm 1 is another place you find this image. Here's Jeremiah 17, 7 and 8. But blessed are those who trust in the Lord and have the Lord as their hope and confidence. They are like trees planted along a riverbank with roots that reach deep into the water. Such trees are not bothered by the heat, and nor are they worried by long months of drought. Their leaves stay green, and they never start producing fruit. So actually, when I drew up this graphic earlier in the week, I drew it up wrong because the image here in those verses is of a fruit tree of some variety. So pick your poison. An apple tree, a pear tree. For my daughter, a pomegranate tree, a peach tree. Right? You got it? And it is describing a tree planted by this body of water that will, regardless of the season or the heat, continue to produce fruit. Here's what you know about that tree, just on basic agriculture. Yes, that tree bared lots of fruit, and its owners were able to eat and be nourished and maybe even have a business selling its apples or its nectarines. That tree also reproduces by bearing fruit. You could take the pit of a peach from a peach tree in Southern California, and you could carry it in a napkin in your purse, assuming the authorities let you get away with this, and you could bring it 3 states away and plant it in your backyard, and lo and behold, you know what you're going to get? A peach tree. This tree bore fruit so that it would be reproduced over and over and over again. One fruit tree, one orange tree, one grapefruit tree, one lemon tree can produce literally hundreds, if not thousands, of siblings, of sons, of daughters, all who bear its DNA from the seed or the pit or the spore that came from that one tree. And here's what the verses in Jeremiah or Psalm 1 don't say about a river tree. Yes, it's true. Its roots grow deep into the water. And yes, it's true. That helps it endure seasons of drought and difficulty. And yes, it's true that because of those deep roots, it will always be able to bear fruit. But that original tree by the river, that original river tree at some point is going to die. There is no way to avoid that. It could be 50 years, it could be 100 years, it could be 200 years. At some point, that strong, faithful tree that has its roots deep into God's waters is going to come to an end, and yet it won't, because it has reproduced itself over and over and over again. And its family spreads out as far as its seeds or its pits have gone. River trees are reproducing trees. And river trees don't last forever. But as they have generation after generation born of its own DNA from its own seeds, it reproduces itself. So really what we're talking about, to use a modern word, is legacy. That you and I are a part of something, and you and I as a people, as Christian people, believe that a life or a shared life like ours as a church will go on beyond itself, will reproduce itself beyond itself, just like Jesus' own life did, just like that river tree. RiverTree will have a legacy. It will last far beyond next Sunday when in its current form and its current context, it ends or it closes. You want to know where you can find the legacy of our church in your life and in the life of others? Yeah, don't look for it in the things that you did for yourself. Look for it in the things that we did for others. Because, as the English author Albert Pine says, it is those things that remain, and it's those things that are immortal. So however much you like or dislike your particular role in the life of our church, however you felt particularly gratified or helped or built up by the work of our church, great. But look beyond yourself to the effect we have had on other lives, and this is where you will find the DNA of RiverTree living on. This is where you will find our legacy living forward. I prefer even this expression better, because this happens to be one of the Christians after whom I model my own life. This is the late Mother Teresa, who says, "I alone cannot change the world, but what I can do is cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples." You want to understand the legacy of RiverTree, how it will last long beyond next Sunday? It's that right there. We, like Mother Teresa, we can't change the world. We're a small group of people and have been for years now. If you look just on the face of it, you would think, like she says about herself, we can't really change much. But what we have done here is exactly how she describes her own life. We have had the courage and the faith to cast that stone across the water and produce many ripples that go far beyond your life and my life and the lives of those here this morning. And the ripples will continue out onto that pond, onto that lake, far after next Sunday for us. RiverTree will have a legacy. Its DNA will live on even beyond you. So what is the legacy of RiverTree? How are you and I kingdom seeds that will fall from this RiverTree, that will reproduce itself elsewhere in other settings? How will you carry on the DNA or the heritage of what we have shared and what we have done together in the next chapter of your life? You probably need to look in these places. What we have learned together, what we have experienced together, what we have tried together, even what we've failed at together. You take those things and you look at that set of things for yourself and what you appreciate about those things, and then you ask yourself, how have they changed me? Because how those things have changed me is the legacy you will carry forward. Now, for those of you who go back a while at our church, you need to pause and you need to step back and look at the totality of your time here. For me, it's almost 10 years. I was hired to be RiverTree's pastor on June 6th. The reason I know this is I just had to pull the paperwork out for our classes. I was hired to be RiverTree's pastor on June 6th, 2007. Okay, for all the history buffs in the room, I chuckle every time I read that date. Know why? June 6th is the day of D-Day, 1944. And if I look back on my first few years here at RiverTree, yep, that date was very appropriate. I became RiverTree's full-time pastor on the second Sunday of September in 2007. So it is almost 10 years that I have had the privilege and honor of being your pastor. But now you step back and you look and you say, wow, okay, in that 10 years time, in that decade, what have we learned together? What have we done together? How have we grown together? And how has it changed me? And if your frame of reference in the life of our church is 5 years, you need to do it with that frame of reference. If it's 3, you need to do it with those 3. And step back and appreciate where you started and where you are now. And for me, it's breathtaking. how remarkably different I am and the change that has occurred while I've had the privilege of being your pastor. And I don't believe that it would have happened any other way. I am so much better at staying centered and grounded and managing conflict and difficult people because I got lots of practice. Not now, earlier. I got lots of practice. And honestly, I didn't do that well at it. When I showed up here in my late 30s, thinking I was all that, if I could just go back to my first 3 years at RiverTree as the person I am now, I would have navigated that so much better. But I am grateful to you that I have had the chance to grow and to learn and to develop personally these deep roots that have sunk down where it really doesn't matter what comes my way, those roots don't ever let go. And I'm indebted to you for learning that. I'm so much better at interacting and loving with equality, so many different kinds of people. I came to you from a town where the median income was over $100,000. And half of the men in my church had PhDs. 60% of every person in the town had master's degrees. Weird little place that I came to you from. So I was good at interacting with those people, kind of high wattage, high IQ, white-collar professional people. And in my time at RiverTree, you know what I've learned to do? To love guys who are unemployed, who work at Walmart, and to understand that they are just as important in the kingdom and have just as much to offer as somebody who has $1 million in the bank. I learned that because of you. And actually, you know what? When I came to RiverTree, I didn't think I was gonna. Because we were the up-and-coming, thriving church in the developing suburb of Byron Center. And I thought, wow, it's going to be really cool to be a pastor of a church with a whole lot of WASPs. White, you know what those are? White Anglo-Saxon professionals. That is not, thank you, that is not what we ended up being. And I am so grateful for that. And I hope you have things like that you, when you step back and look at our time together, resonate with you as deeply. My list could go on and on. That's two. Obviously, the relationships we have, you will carry forward with you after next Sunday. They are what makes church church, I would say to you. It is our principles and our values, yes, but right next on that list is the love and the relationships that we share. That won't change. That will be part of the DNA of our church that you carry with you. It is the legacy of our church that you carry with you. I was telling my wife this the other day. I have been so fortunate that in this season of my life, especially the last 3 or 4 years, I have developed the best friends I've ever had in my life. And there's a set of 2 to 4 people that I meet with and I have coffee with and I talk with. And it is amazing to me that just with a little effort and a little intentionality on our part, God has blessed these relationships so richly. And the biggest thing I'm bummed about moving to the burbs of D.C. and Virginia is I'm not going to be with those people anymore. And poor Pastor Chris, the branch, the last time I saw him 2 weeks ago, I had the guy in tears. But that happens on occasion for other reasons. But he feels the same way. He's like, now it's kind of coming home to me. This is real. What am I going to do without you in my life? And I kind of wonder that too about the friendships I've formed. I hope you feel that way about some of the friends you have here. And you need to feel like this is your legacy that you will carry with you. It does not have to end next Sunday. And of course, you need to take into account, and this goes back before my time at RiverTree, you need to take into account all of the people who have been burned by church or run off by church or have a terrible impression about Christianity, that God has used RiverTree to reintroduce to Jesus. And this, if nothing else, is the lingering ripple effect of RiverTree in a life. It's been amazing to me to get emails or see Facebook posts from people over the last 2 weeks who haven't been a part of our church family in years, but to hear them say how much you meant to them. Because they needed a place of grace. They needed a safe haven to heal, and you were that for them. And once their bones were mended and their soul was knit back together, they moved on to what is next. But you will always be that special to them because of the season that you serve them in their life. Don't lose sight of that. That is your legacy. And the list is literally dozens of people long. I'm sure we're in triple figures, just in my time at RiverTree, of those who would share like that about your impact on them. Now here's the key. This is how RiverTree is going to reproduce itself in your life. This is how you will take its DNA forward. You need to feel a sense of spiritual obligation to preserve what you have learned here, how you have grown here, who you have loved here, and who is close to you here on down the line. You need to feel spiritually obligated to preserve this and then carry it forward into what's next. Here's why. Your time here at RiverTree, like mine, whether it's 2 years or 6 years or for me, about 10 years, this has been an indispensable, invaluable, central part of your spiritual journey. Your spiritual life, your spiritual story that God is telling, that He's weaving together. This has not been a mistake. This has not been a detour. This has not been a cul-de-sac out of which you could not find your way. This was an indispensable part of the growth trajectory that God has you on, and now you need to own it. How you've changed, how you've grown, own it, hold on to it, and take personal responsibility for it, and do not let it go. I won't. What you have taught me, how you have blessed me, how I have stretched and changed remarkably in a decade. I'm never going to let that go, and I'm never going to stop being that person for however long I have left, for wherever I pastor again if I do. This is how I will carry that along. The key word here is obligation. Don't just let it go. Now, last week, this is actually how I want to end today. Interestingly, and this fits in with the general theme of what we're talking about this morning. So last week was the first Sunday that we talked real openly about needing to end RiverTree in its current form and context. And after the service, we on the steering team fielded your questions and your concerns if you had any, but you were very gracious about it. You know what the theme or the idea was that we got asked the most? Right up there on the screen. Very practical, down-to-earth question. So where do we go next? How do we find another church to which to move on to? How do we do that together? This is what 3 or 4 of you asked in different settings after the service last Sunday. Here's the irony. My family and I have got to do the same thing. By the time I hit Northern Virginia sometime around September 1st, we're going to be church hunting with you. So allow me to pass on to you, based on what we've already said this morning, how my family and I are going to go about finding a new church home, and you can either take my advice or leave it, as has always been the case. Most importantly, what you need to do is you need to do it together. Because so much of the legacy of RiverTree are the people that matter to you and you've let into your life and you've invested in, you need to go as groups to different churches. Now, we don't have the chance to do that. It's just going to be our family. But who are the people who matter to you here? Who are you close to? Talk to them over the next few weeks and go together and invest yourself together in your next church community. I would also ask you to do this. Some of you are doing a really good job right now as we speak of investigating different area churches. Would you please share that with the rest of us? Use our Facebook page. Go to our Facebook page and say, hey, after next Sunday, the 6th of August, we're going to try this church, and this church, and here's why. Because we've been to the website, we like what we've seen there. Anyone who wants to come is welcome to try. Would you do that for each other? Help each other learn about the churches out there that might be a good fit. Number 2, you need to go to a church that allows you to carry on the legacy of RiverTree. The legacy of RiverTree in your life. Go someplace that may even need how you've grown or what you've learned in their context. I'll give you a great example. This is from our class's leader, the guy in charge of our district, Randy Weiner. He thinks one of the lasting legacies of our church is going to be how we don't just invest money in the needs of people, but also walk alongside them and figure out what in their life they could change, what coaching they might need, what training they might need, what other partnership they might need. And then we walk with them for a period of time, not just giving them money, but investing ourselves in them like that. We call that our Barnabas Project. What he would say to you if he were here this morning is, you don't get it, RiverTree. There's almost no other church that he knows of in our district who is that wise about how they try to invest in needy lives. He would say to you, for those who are on that team or are familiar with those principles, one of the things you need to take with you into your next church community is that. Don't go to a church that doesn't give a rip about meeting practical needs, but also help them be wiser about how they do it and help them realize writing a check is the easiest thing to do. Giving your time and your energy and your love and your wisdom or expertise, that's far harder. But that's part of what you could take with you. I'll give you another one. Our commitment as a church family to mutual respect when we disagree about what can be hot button issues in the country or in the Christian faith, yet you probably know before I tell you, that is rare in God's kingdom in the year 2017. Churches like our country would rather be polarized and dig in deeply, dogmatically about such divisive issues. We have learned not to do that. I would say to you, you are obligated before God to practice that golden rule toward people regardless of where you go next. And I, for one, would tell you, I'm not going to pastor a church or be a part of a church where that doesn't happen, which may mean I just subtracted 75% of the churches in Northern Virginia from where my family could land. But that's how committed I am to that, and I would hope you feel the same way. Now, number 3 is similar to number 2, but it says it in a different way. I think as we go forward as a church family, one of the best things you can do is you need to think about what priorities in a church matter to you most. And please, for the love of Jesus, let it be substance, not style. Don't go to a church where you like the band. Don't go to a church where the speaker is light years better than me. No. Have we learned nothing together than that? Choose substance, not style. Maybe you end up in a church of 50 people. and the music's terrible, and the preacher is too. But man, they love each other, and they are committed to growing together and being a family of faith together. And you see in them a desire to respect each other and walk alongside each other and invite other hurting, needy people into their midst to be healed by Christ. That church is a great place to call home. I hope you will not be fooled into what is the common approach to church in our day, where you go based on style, the dog and pony show, not substance. I hope that our time at RiverTree has taught you better than that. I have no idea where we're going to end up in Northern Virginia, but it could be a church that uses hymnals. Right. Fred's down. Fred wants to come. They could play an organ. They could be mostly senior citizens. Eli, don't say anything about my age right now. I don't care, and neither should you, because that's style, not substance. You follow me? I hope what we've learned together is that substance, the things that matter the most in Scripture, we are willing to focus on that and not all the bells and whistles, not the eye candy that so many people in church sometimes try to sell as the most important stuff. Number 4, it probably seems real obvious, but Heather and I have always had a rule, well, we tried to anyway. Our rule has been we should never pastor a church that we wouldn't invite somebody to. And that's a pretty profound thing when you think of it. I would ask you the same thing. Wherever you go next, it needs to be a place that you believe in enough, that you like enough, that you believe in their substance, not their style enough, that you can see that other people not named you need that place. And you are willing to actively invest in their present and their future by inviting those people in your circle who might need it to your new church home. That would be one of the great basic ways for you to figure out whether or not you found the right church to be at. Is it a place, not that you feel comfortable, but that you would feel comfortable inviting other people in your circles to come and be a part of? Every week of the last 3 weeks that we have together in this setting as a church family, we are going to observe communion together. That beautiful rite from Christ last night that he gave to his disciples. And today we're going to focus on those verses that I led with. We are going to focus on what Jesus in John 12 describes to be his productive death. His willingness and courage to die a day later, a few days later, knowing that it was because he was willing to do that, that much fruit would be born or produced. And as we think about our time in this setting, in this form, coming to an end a week from now, don't let this be far from your mind either. Just like that river tree in Jeremiah, our time, may be coming to an end in this form, but imagine the seed that is being scattered to be reproduced everywhere, just like our Jesus so long ago. So